The air hung thick and cold, a suffocating blanket pulled tight over my face. My dream, no, my nightmare, had me in its icy grip. A harbour, shrouded in fog so dense it seemed to writhe, was all I could see. The mournful cry of a distant buoy echoed through the oppressive silence, each clang a hammer blow against my sanity. I was rooted to the spot, my feet encased in concrete, my heart a drum in my chest. Fear, raw and primal, oozed into my mind, paralysing me. The air, thick with the smell of salt and something else, something rotten, filled my lungs, choking me. Then a figure emerged from the fog, tall and gaunt, its edges blurred and indistinct. It moved with an unnatural grace, gliding over the cobblestones rather than walking. A dread so profound it defied description seized me. I wanted to scream, to run, but my body refused to obey. I was trapped, a prisoner in my own nightmare, forced to watch as the figure approached, its form solidifying with each terrifying step. As the figure drew closer, I could make out more details. It wore a long, heavy coat that reached its ankles, the colour of ash and decay. Its face, hidden beneath a wide-brimmed hat, remained obscured, shrouded in shadow. In its gloved hand, it clutched a walking stick, its silver tip glinting ominously in the moonlight. With each step closer, the figure seemed to pull the surrounding fog with it, the darkness becoming more concentrated, more oppressive. The air grew colder, biting at my skin like needles of ice. I could feel its presence now, cold and menacing, seeping into my bones. It stopped a few feet away, its form still partially obscured by the swirling fog. The silence stretched, punctuated only by the pounding of my own blood in my ears. I waited, every nerve ending screaming for release, for the inevitable. Then it spoke, its voice a low rasp, like dry leaves skittering across a tomb. "You will come to me," it whispered, the sound chilling me to the core. "You cannot hide." I woke with a gasp, my body bathed in sweat, my heart racing. The room was dark, the air thick with an unsettling silence. I could still feel the remnants of the nightmare clinging to me like a shadow that refused to let go. The remnants of the nightmare clung to me like cobwebs, the chilling whisper of the figure echoing in my mind. It was as if the dream had left a mark on my very soul, a scar that would not fade with the morning light. Sunlight streamed through my window, a stark contrast to the suffocating darkness of my dream. The golden rays seemed almost mocking, as if they were trying to erase the terror that had gripped me just moments before. For a moment I lay there trying to convince myself it was just a dream, a figment of my imagination. But the fear was too real, too palpable. It was as if the nightmare had crossed over into reality, leaving me trapped in a waking horror. But the fear lingered, a cold knot in my stomach. It was a feeling I couldn't shake, no matter how hard I tried. The memory of the dream was like a poison seeping into my thoughts and tainting everything with its darkness. The details of the nightmare were etched into my mind with terrifying clarity. The figure's face, the fog that surrounded us, the chilling words it spoke, they were all burned into my memory, refusing to fade. As I went about my day, the memory of the dream continued to haunt me. Every shadow seemed to hide the figure. Every whisper seemed to carry its voice. I couldn't escape it, no matter where I went. The fog, the figure, the chilling words, all replayed in my mind, sending shivers down my spine. It was as if the nightmare had become a part of me, a dark presence that followed me everywhere. I tried to shake off the unease, to lose myself in the routine of my day, but it was no use. The fear was always there, lurking just beneath the surface, ready to pounce at any moment. The feeling of dread only intensified as the day wore on. Every noise, every movement seemed to be a reminder of the nightmare. I felt like I was being watched, hunted by the figure from my dream. Everywhere I went, I imagined glimpses of the figure from my dream, lurking in the shadows, watching me. It was as if the nightmare had come to life, invading my waking hours and turning them into a living hell. The line between dream and reality began to blur, my nightmare seeping into my waking hours. I could no longer tell where the dream ended and reality began. It was a terrifying thought, one that left me feeling utterly helpless and alone. Driven by an unseen force, I found myself drawn to the harbour as dusk began to settle. The sky was painted in hues of orange and purple, the last light of the day reflecting off the calm waters. It was a scene of serene beauty, yet I felt an inexplicable pull, a sense of urgency that I couldn't ignore. The air was heavy with the smell of salt and seaweed, the familiar scent doing little to calm my growing unease. Each breath I took was filled with the briny tang of the ocean, a reminder of the vast, mysterious depths that lay beyond the shore. The waves crashed against the rocks with a rhythmic persistence, as if whispering secrets only the sea could know. The fog was rolling in, just like in my dream, blanketing the harbour in a thick, ethereal shroud. It moved with a life of its own, tendrils of mist curling and twisting in the air. The world around me began to fade, the familiar landmarks of the harbour becoming ghostly silhouettes in the encroaching fog. As I walked along the pier, the wooden planks creaking beneath my feet, the memory of my nightmare became more and more vivid. Each step seemed to echo in the stillness, a reminder of the path I was compelled to follow. The pier stretched out before me, a narrow bridge between the known and the unknown. The chilling whisper of the figure echoed in my mind, "You will come to me, you cannot hide." The words were a haunting refrain, a promise and a threat that had haunted my dreams for nights on end. They seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, carried on the wind and woven into the fabric of the fog. The fog continued to thicken, swirling around me like a ghostly embrace. It was as if the very air was alive, wrapping me in its cold, damp tendrils. Visibility dropped to mere feet, and the world beyond the pier ceased to exist, swallowed by the relentless mist. The air grew colder, seeping into my clothes, chilling me to the bone. Each gust of wind felt like icy fingers brushing against my skin, a stark contrast to the warmth of the day that had just passed. I pulled my jacket tighter around me, but it did little to ward off the penetrating chill. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, a frantic rhythm against my ribs. It was a wild, uncontrollable beat driven by a mix of fear and anticipation. My breath came in short, shallow gasps, each one a struggle against the oppressive weight of the fog. Then, through the swirling fog, I saw it. A shadowy silhouette emerging from the mist like a spectre from another world. It moved with a slow, deliberate grace, each step bringing it closer to the edge of the pier. The figure from my nightmare standing at the end of the pier, its form tall and gaunt, its features obscured by the shadows and the mist. It was a haunting presence, a dark silhouette against the pale backdrop of the fog. Every detail was exactly as I had seen it in my dream, down to the way it stood, motionless and waiting. It was exactly as I had seen it in my dream, every terrifying detail etched into my memory. The hollow eyes, the elongated limbs, the sense of malevolence that radiated from it. It was a vision of pure dread, a nightmare made flesh, and it was waiting for me at the end of the pier. Terror, raw and consuming, seized me. It was as if the very air around me had thickened, pressing down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. The darkness seemed to close in, wrapping me in a suffocating embrace. My legs turned to lead, my breath catching in my throat. Each gasp felt like a desperate attempt to draw in life, but the air was heavy, laden with an unseen menace. My heart pounded in my chest, a frantic drumbeat that echoed in my ears. I wanted to run, to scream, but I was rooted to the spot, my body refusing to obey the dictates of my mind. It was as if an invisible force held me in place, mocking my helplessness. The urge to flee was overwhelming, yet my muscles betrayed me, locked in a paralyzing grip of fear. The figure turned its head slightly, and although I still couldn't make out its face, I could feel its gaze upon me, cold and calculating. It was a gaze that pierced through the darkness, seeing into the very depths of my soul. The air around it seemed to shimmer, distorting reality itself. It raised its hand, the silver tip of its walking stick glinting in the fading light. The motion was deliberate, almost ritualistic, as if it was performing some ancient rite. The glint of the silver tip was hypnotic, drawing my eyes to it despite the terror that gripped me. "You have come," it rasped, its voice the whisper of death itself. The words sent a chill down my spine, each syllable dripping with malice. It was a voice that spoke of forgotten horrors, of nightmares that lurked just beyond the edge of consciousness. A wave of dizziness washed over me, the world tilting on its axis. It was as if the ground beneath me had become unstable, shifting and swaying like a ship in a storm. My vision blurred, the edges of my sight darkening as the vertigo took hold. I stumbled back, my foot catching on the edge of the pier. The sudden jolt broke the spell, and for a moment I regained control of my limbs, but it was too late. The edge of the pier was unforgiving, and I felt myself teetering on the brink. For a fleeting moment, I saw the figure take a step towards me, its form solidifying in the swirling fog, a triumphant smirk playing on its lips. It was a look of victory, of a predator that had cornered its prey. The fog seemed to part around it, revealing more of its sinister form. And then I was falling, tumbling into the icy depths below. The cold water enveloped me, a shock to my system that stole the breath from my lungs. I struggled to orient myself, the darkness of the water pressing in from all sides. The last thing I saw before the darkness claimed me was the figure standing at the edge of the pier, its form silhouetted against the dying light, its laughter echoing in the fog. It was a sound that would haunt me, a cruel reminder of the terror that had unfolded. The figure's silhouette remained etched in my mind, a dark spectre that loomed over my consciousness as the cold embrace of the water pulled me under.